Hey guys, Bruce, 51 Nabco. I'm going to change out these parts in my Celica today. It's a 1990 Celica. I've got CV axles to change out, and also a power steering rack and pinion assembly gearbox. So I'm just getting set up right now, and when I'm all set up, I'll continue. Okay, I kind of I'm gonna have to do some funky videoing this time. This is actually the core of the power steering rack of the 1990 Toyota Celica, my wife's car, Mrs. 51 Napco. Anyway, I ran into a couple of little difficulties when I was taking everything apart, and I forgot to keep the play button going on the video. So I'm having to do a little backtracking now, which will be basically the beginning of the video. And I'm just going to walk through a couple of steps that I didn't walk anybody through, and then I'll try to piece the video together. Anyway, it's a fairly simple operation to swap out one of these power steering racks. The first thing you want to do is get the vehicle straight, have the steering wheel straight, have it locked. I just locked it, and then I've also got some parts over here. After you lock the steering wheel with the key in a straight position, then that way it's not going to be turning on you, which kind of helps the situation. And then here's the front CV joint axles that I replaced also. So anyway, you do that, then you pop the hood, disconnect the negative lead on the battery, and get it out of the way. Then you're pretty much done within there. Then what you want to do is jack the vehicle up with a jack, and then support it with two jack stands. Type of jack stands I have are right here, and with the Celica I put them about, I think it was like 3 clicks up, and I supported the vehicle right behind the front wheels on the body mounts, right where they are supposed to be mounted, and that gives you plenty of room to do all the maintenance that you need to perform under there. So you have the vehicle jacked to the body mounts, and then you're pretty much ready to go. Then what you want to do to disconnect, to get this thing out of here, remove the tires and wheels. Okay, had a little bit of a setback. I had to go to Harbor Freight and pick up some sockets because I didn't have a 30mm socket to get the hub nut off. So anyway, that's the driver's side front CV joint axle. Very easy to take off. It's just this is the outer, this is what's attached to the hub, this spline. It's a 30mm bolt. Just make sure your wheel will not turn. You loosen this bolt. Then you loosen the 3 bolts that hold the lower ball joint onto the lower A-arm, where it connects to the steering knuckle, and disconnect the bottom. Here, let me show you on this side where you can actually see what I'm talking about. You disconnect these 3 bolts right here. They connect here, here, and back here, and then you just pull that off out of the way. And you can also tap with a rubber mallet if you need to on the end of the axle. That pops it off of the hub right out of there. So then when you do that, you just move this off to the side like I've done. Now it's off to the front, and you just pull the axle out. There's a little, let me show you. On this side there is a little circular snap ring that holds this end of the splines into the transmission. So you have to get some sort of a way to pry on it and pull it out. It's fairly simple. It's just a snap ring, and it's just spring loaded. So you just you know, get a pry bar in there, and it should pop right off. Then you just slip the other one in, reverse process. Then behind, you've got your tie rod ends. You've got a cotter pin and a castle nut. So just disconnect, or take your cotter pin out, disconnect your castle nut, take your ball joints off. Tie rod end. Okay, I'm disconnecting the tie rod end because that's one side of the steering gearbox, the rack, which goes in there. And I'm in the process of disconnecting that also. So I'll keep on going. And then underneath the vehicle, this is the part that's important. Underneath the vehicle, there are two cross members. One cross member goes from A-arm to A-arm. It kind of mounts the whole underneath of the car together. It's 3 bolts on each side, I believe. Disconnect that cross member, get it out of the way. Then the other cross member goes forward to aft on the car, and it's also the jacking point for the vehicle. That's got 2 bolts forward, 2 bolts aft. It also has 2 bolts that are underneath 2 little plastic caps. One of the little plastic caps is right here that I still have to put on. You remove these little plastic caps, and you get to the bolts that mount the forward and the aft motor mounts. You disconnect those bolts, that way you can drop that cross member out of the way. You don't even need the cross member there. The motor will stay there just fine because you have both side motor mounts still holding everything in place. So that's not an issue. Okay. In order to disconnect the rack, I had to disconnect this cross member that connects the 2 A-arms together, and then this cross member that goes to the engine mounts. Disconnected the engine mount a little bit just to loosen it up to get it out of the way. Anyway, it was a real pain. If you see, I can't really point to it right over here. This is the bracket that holds the power steering rack. And then coming through this side here. So anyway, I had to disconnect that cross member. It's sitting right there. And so now I'm going to make my way over to the other side. Anyway, I've got this axle just put in. I still have the knuckle off to the side. And I still have the other side. Then what you want to do is you want to disconnect the aft motor mount from the engine. It's 3 bolts. That way you get enough room in there to disconnect the bracket that holds the power steering rack. There's 2 brackets. They're U bracket looking things. There's a driver's side and a passenger side. Well, the driver's side one is just behind the motor mount. And it, let's see. Okay, this is actually up kind of backwards, but this one is the driver's side. This is the one that's just aft of that motor mount. So you have to get that motor mount out of the way to remove this top bolt. That's the hardest part of this entire job. Okay, so anyway, disconnect that motor mount, then you're pretty much free. All you need to do, disconnect these 2 lines here. There's also a bolt that where the power steering lines run up here. Over here, there's a 10mm bolt that holds a bracket that holds the 2 power steering lines to the side of the vehicle. If you disconnect that bolt, it's a lot easier to remove these 2 lines. Okay, then you disconnect this bolt here. I think it's a 12mm, 10mm. I don't know. They're all standard millimeter sockets. Disconnect 1 bolt here. There's another one up on the top of the U-joints that you can disconnect, and then you slide on the splines. You just slide the U-joint right off the top of the pinion shaft here. So anyway, that's disconnected. The 2 lines are disconnected. You've got that U-bracket disconnected. You've got the one that goes around right here. It's got a little rubber donut and the U-bracket, 2 bolts, and then basically you push the assembly through to the passenger side, which is going to be going in this direction, And then you can drop it out of the bottom of the car this direction. What you have to do is you have to get this end of the tie rod out of the hole first. So you push it over to the passenger side, then you drop it out of the car. That's how you do it. And then anyway, it's basically a reverse procedure, putting it all back together. You know, you just, and then another important part is what I did is, and after I removed everything, I just disconnected the tie rod ends, and I counted how many threads were on the old one, just to give it some sort of a ballpark. Oh, another thing that I did is when the car was parked, you see tape right there, tape right here, over here, and over here. What I did is when the car was just sitting here with the steering wheel locked, rear tires chalked, I measured the, I just taped, I put a straight edge on the front tires and ran it as far forward as I could, put tape on the ground, then put the straight edge against the tire, ran it as far aft as I could, put a tape on the ground. That way I could get just a ballpark of where the tires are at the point that I started. Then, with the ball joints or the tie rod ends screwed onto the ends of the push rods exactly how they were, and then I came back and I measured, I put the wheels on after everything was reassembled, and I measured them against this tape, and they were real close. I just tightened everything back up and I gave it a test drive, and it's real close. It just slightly drifts to the right, so it needs to be aligned now.